pretty shocked to find out that there was a connection to Ramsland and potentially a connection to my father.
Empowering True Crime, Alex here. Welcome to Empowering True Crime, where we keep it empowering, justice, advocacy for the victims. All right, so this is an update on the Idaho 4, and I've been wanting to do this for a couple of days now. I'm going to share with you a really remarkable video from Brian Entin. He interviewed the daughter of the BTK killer. And what was interesting about this is the perspective of a family member of a murderer and what kind of goes through the mind of somebody and even the repercussions years later of what can go on in the mind of a family member. I really thought it was fascinating. So we're going to share, I'm not going to share all of it, but I'm going to share bits and pieces of this and we can watch it together and we can comment on it. All right. So let me go ahead and share. And this is Kerri Rawson.
What did you first think when you heard that Dr.
Kerri Rawson is the daughter of the BTK killer.
Ramsland was teaching Brian Kohberger?
I found out Friday after Kohberger.
So the teacher, the professor that he's referring to is a professor that studies serial killers. And she actually has written books and had been in communication for years with the BTK killer. And that's who she's referring to. She was actually a professor of Brian Kohberger at Desales University.
His arrest. I actually saw somebody mention Dr. Ramsland on Twitter. And then I realized, there was a connection there through Desales University. Personally, my first reaction was just like my stomach churned and I literally physically got ill. I live with chronic PTSD. So anything unexpected can really throw me. And knowing that there was now a connection back to Ramsland and she connects to my father, it was just a lot because I've been pretty invested in the Idaho case. I've been keeping up with the news and the true crime community. I've been quietly invested in the case. And so I was pretty shocked to find out that there was a connection to Ramsland and potentially a connection to my father, but we're going to have to wait and see.
One thing that I thought was really interesting, she mentioned PTSD. So she's not even the victim as far as like a murder victim herself, but the family is going through pain and trauma. And it's just so interesting how many lives are really lost and families are lost due to the actions of that murderer, that initial abuser.
Do you think he may have had any sort of communication with your father?
Kohberger could definitely have had communication with my father. It's very common for criminology students and in general, the true crime community or just fans or people that are curious in general to contact my father via mail. And occasionally they do speak to him on the phone. Knowing how personally connected Ramsland is to my father, I would not be surprised if Kohberger had at least tried to write my father. We're going to need to see letters. I mean, potentially, if Kohberger has contacted my father, there would be letters in Kohberger's house and also in my father's jail cell. I do think if there's a connection made, the FBI definitely need to go speak to my father.
So another thing she mentioned, so it's not uncommon for people studying criminology to contact her father. It's so interesting because it's almost like if Brian Kohberger, it's obviously these are allegations that he murdered the 4 students, but did he go into that criminology degree so that did the murderous activity or thoughts happen after he started studying it, or did he get into criminology because of that, right? So which came first? And it's just because it's interesting because it's been said that Bundy studied criminal law. There was another murderer, I can't remember now off the top of my head, another murderer who studied criminology as well. And then of course, Kohberger. And so these are people that are getting access. So Kohberger had access to this, like the foremost authority on serial killers. And like she said, it's not uncommon for criminology students to contact her father, a serial killer. So it's interesting. It's like, it's almost like a reason, because you're studying it, to be in contact with these people. And if they're fanboys or fangirls or whatever, it's interesting to have that as a reason to contact. It's almost like a legitimate reason to contact these people. So let's continue.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's one, but I need proof. So, people just kind of saying, okay, Kohberger was influenced by your father. Well, obviously we know he studied my father in criminology classes. He probably studied him heavier since he had Ramsland as a professor. But we need to find out if there's a deeper connection. It concerns me. My father's had several Mel violations and various violations, including cyber stalking me. So it concerns me that my father continues to have access to the public, and the public has access to my father.
That's another really interesting point, that we don't know who he's been contacting. So it's not like they're going to make that information public. So if Kohberger has been contacting the BTK killer, then we won't know. It's like, again, that's not public information. So it would be really interesting to see.
Knowing what you know about Dr. Ramsland, do you think she may have had an inclination that something was off with Kohberger because she studied your father so closely and has been studying serial killers for so long?
At this point, we need to believe that Ramsland, in good faith, didn't have any clue that Kohberger was capable of this form of deviance. I have questions about how did he get into the master's and PhD programs. I have questions about was he background checked? Did his supposed drug use or previous drug use, was that taken in consideration? On the other hand, after being raised by a psychopath, I do know that they can hide very easily, that they can put on several masks and basically change how they're interacting with you, mimic you. Basically, a lot of times they're saying to you what they think you want to hear. So I would assume Kohberger held himself in a certain way in a professional educational setting. I
just wanted to pause here a second. A couple of things that she said, a lot of people have they've been giving this, that professor, that serial killer authority expert, a lot of flack because she taught this student, or taught this guy. The thing is, you've got people with serious anger issues that don't kill people. And then you've got people that don't express any anger issues that kill people. So I feel like it would be really difficult, unless he was specifically bringing up killing people. I feel like it would be very difficult for anyone to know that this person would do that. I would feel like it would need to be some serious, he either needs to be talking about killing people, writing about killing people, threatening to kill people, or there was signs of abuse of animals and things like that, killing animals and other things like that, which I know is usually like a precursor for some serial killers, is that they kill animals and things like that. So there would have to be some serious signs, which I really doubt that any teacher, that he would have that relationship with any teacher. So I really feel like that that in that capacity, I don't feel like he would ever be in that capacity. And if he did, I'm sure she would have reported it, right? So it would have to be something serious like that. The other thing that Kerri mentioned, is about the mask. I think that is fascinating. And she's since written a tweet where she said that her father would kill somebody, go to work, and then come home for dinner. So it's like he was able to compartmentalize this killer persona and then this father and husband persona. And I think that that is so fascinating. And I'm not a psychologist, but it would be really interesting to see how they're able to compartmentalize. Is that a disorder, like a schizophrenic or a multiple personality disorder? I don't know. I'm not a counselor, or a psychologist, but it really is interesting to see how they're able to put on those masks.
Kind of shocked how far he's made it into the criminology fields. But it's happened before. My father has a criminal justice degree. D'Angelo, Golden State Killer, he has one. But
there you go. So D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, and BTK had criminology degrees.
And they, I believe, studied criminal law. So it happens. I mean, you can be an expert on psychopaths and they're still going to trick you. And honestly, somebody like Kohberger probably found that thrilling. You know, I don't know to what degree where his deviance caught up with him, or to what degree he knew he was deviant or he was capable of this kind of act. But I'm assuming, based on what I know about like my father and other, you know, serial killers like my father, they kind of get off on being smart and thinking they're smarter than everybody in the room, and you know they're not going to get caught. I definitely can see that being the case here with Kohberger.
You know what it's like to be a family member of someone who's killed. I mean, what can you say about what Kohberger's family? I mean, he's just a suspect at this point, but what can you say about what his family may be going through?
Kohberger's family is going through utter hell, I assure you. I mean, at this moment, we have no reason to suspect that they knew. You know, we're going to have to wait on law enforcement, but innocent until proven guilty. So as of now, we have no reason to suspect they had any involvement, they had any knowledge. I know people are out there saying, well, what about the car, and that the father supposedly drove home Kohberger from college. I get it. But I was home for Christmas in December of 2004, stayed in my father's house probably for like a week and a half. That was the last time I saw him. He was already kind of involved for several months with BTK communications with the Wichita police. I vaguely knew about that, but I was not, you know, invested in it. I wasn't really.
Let me put a pause here for a moment, because there has been body cam footage that actually Brian Entin has shared on his channel, and where the father of Brian Kohberger was super chatty, and it was definitely a little bit odd. Now, they left on the same day, supposedly, as the Washington State University. There was a shooting right in front. SWAT team killed somebody who was saying that he was going to kill his roommates. And so they left that same day. But it was still a little odd. The father was just super chatty. Maybe he was nervous. I don't know, talking to police or whatever. Maybe he was trying to like talk up, schmooze the officer to get, to avoid his son getting a ticket. But it was just very odd. And not that I believe that his father is involved, but it is a little strange. It is a little bit odd. So I'll just leave it at that.
Looking at it. And my father would have been the last person I would have suspected. So I got the FBI knock at like around noon in Michigan. I lived outside of Detroit at the time, but it was like a detective team with, what I understand, like support from a SWAT team that went in and notified my mom, because they didn't know if my father had rigged the house. They didn't know what they were walking into. They didn't know if my mom was involved. So they needed to be safe. So I can understand the approach they took and why they did it at night. I also know, like, in my father's case, they highly suspected my father, but they wanted to confirm it with DNA. So they watched him, would set up like a car with detectives and kept an eye on him for days, surveillance.
Which is similar to what happened with Kohberger. I believe that they suspected him and maybe they were waiting for some DNA to come back, or DNA confirmation to come back. But Kohberger was followed and allegedly was followed for days. Actually, no, not allegedly. The police actually did say that he had some officers that were following him in the days before the SWAT team went in there and caught him at night.
Or 4 or 5 days before they arrested him, waiting on DNA to come back. They used my DNA. I was one of the first familiar DNA cases to catch one of these people. I might have been the first, I'm not sure.
It is suspected that Kohberger was caught potentially through the DNA genealogy DNA. So it'd be really interesting to see what the probable cause affidavit states.
So it's a lot, and it's a lot for his family. It's going to be a lot. My father pled guilty, so we didn't have to go to court. But if Kohberger pleads innocent, then they're going to have to probably be witnesses in court, testify. You're talking years of therapy they're going to need, and like the quicker they can get into trauma therapy, the better. I made that mistake of not getting trauma therapy for 2 years. I thought I was going insane from the PTSD.
I think all the family members of all involved should get trauma therapy, as well as the surviving roommates, and probably anybody that's close to them, any loved ones. The ex of Kaylee should be doing trauma therapy. He's going to have PTSD if he's not involved. He's going to have PTSD for the fact that like his ex-girlfriend called him and he wasn't there and she died. I mean, that's got to be traumatizing as well.
So it's a lot, and they have every right now not to speak to the media, or the right to speak if they want. But I would recommend not speaking until at least the case is over, the trial's over.
Kohberger has indicated through his public defender that he is innocent essentially at this point. That's what he's saying.
Actually, and this is he hasn't said he's innocent. He said that Kohberger is looking forward to being exonerated. Those were his words. He didn't say, unless he said something since then, specifically saying, I am innocent. I did not commit those murders. He's saying exonerated, which of course we all take to mean that he's saying that he's innocent, but he said exonerated, which means not being held, right? Actually, let me look up the exact definition of exonerated. Exonerated. Absolve from blame for a fault or wrongdoing, especially after due consideration of the case. Exactly. That's what it says. So it doesn't mean you didn't do it. It means you're absolved from blame. That's exactly the way that I took it when I heard him say exonerated. So not that he's innocent, but that he's exonerated from blame for the wrongdoing. Very different. Not very different, but it is different. It's a distinction.
I mean, as a family member of someone in this situation, I mean, initially, did you believe that your dad was innocent, or did you immediately, look at the evidence and say, okay, I think he's guilty?
When the FBI agent notified me, I mean, he was clearly, he was like, your dad is BTK. It wasn't a question. I went into shock instantly, but I spent a while trying to defend my father, saying, hey, he's a Boy Scout leader, he's a church leader, he's a really good dad, he's taking camping and fishing, he's basically like my best friend. Like, there's no way this man did what you're saying. And for me, 7 of the murders took place before I was born. So I didn't even know about the BTK cases until 2004 when my father came back up. in communication. So I'm asking, what are the dates? Because I'm trying to alibi him. You know, I'm questioning what's happening. I said, you got the wrong guy. You had arrested the wrong guy in December. You know, I'm asking for dates. And then he says 86. And then I remember that my neighbor lady down the street had been murdered in 85, and that it was a strangulation, and as far as I know, was unsolved. So I actually, as far as I know, turned my father in to be looked at for the 8th murder, and they called it, the FBI agent stopped and called it back. And then,
My understanding, and I don't think she says it in this interview, is that she heard audio and she knew that it was her father.
and there was a 10th. So, but my father was confessing within 6 or 7 hours of that day. And so we were called by the FBI that night and told that he was confessing. And I literally was like, he's confessing to what? You know, you're still just in complete shock and denial and arguing, you know, with the FBI. And then they said they had found mementos that my father had taken from the victim's crime scenes inside my house. So that night I was still trying to alibi. So I was researching the cases, trying to alibi my father, trying to remember when I was a little girl. I mean, we're talking about when I was 6, 7, you know, the oldest I was 12. And I came across an audio tape of my father where he had been recorded, reporting a homicide in 1977 before I was born, a little clip. And in hindsight, I knew right away it was my dad. As far as I know, I had never heard that audio clip before then. You know, I was protected. I was 26. I was young, married, protected, living outside of Detroit, Michigan. Honestly, if I had been in Wichita, still living with my parents, not married, I probably would have had my nose stick in this case, in the BTK cases. And it could have been a completely different ending to this story if I had been. So.
Yeah, because he was Boy Scout, you know, troop leader, whatever. But if she had been close to it, maybe she would have, you know, maybe he would have turned on her.
Within that first night, then I had to start coming to terms with that my father had done this. And the next day they announced that he had committed these 10 murders. And I ended up going home and being with my family. You know, my mom was in denial, kind of go back and forth. You go through this grieving process. She said it was like her father, like my father had died, like her husband had died. So everybody just deals with it differently. And then there's letters early on between me and my father. I'm basically saying, look, if you did this, if you're guilty, take the plea, spare the community, spare the victim's family, spare us. And he did take the plea. But my family didn't speak to the media. We were told early on by the FBI, don't talk to the media. It's going to make things worse. And I was like, make what worse? You know, by the first day, I saw a video of you knocking on their door. Like that was my reality of cameras, you know, in my hallway, in my apartment, people knocking on the door, trying to get interviews. I know you guys have a job. I get that now. Early on, I was so angry at the media. I was angry at the media, angry at the FBI. I just angry at everything.
Yeah, I feel like with this digital age, the media has become probably more investigative, is able to find out a lot more information than would have even happened in her, you know, around then, 2004, she's saying. So I think that the media might even be more investigative. I guess it's the best way I could say it.
So,
I mean, was knocking on the door yesterday, but sometimes people
it's your job.
And also, like, sometimes you're surprised and they want to talk.
They want to talk, and that's a right of everyone to talk or not to talk, you know. And we thought not talking, you know, sort of being that good Midwestern shut down, quiet, private family was the answer. But I was suffering. I was dying inside. I literally was dying inside for years.
That's actually a really good point. And part of the reason why with Empowering True Crime, I really want to share the stories of the victims and allow survivors, if they're still with us, to tell their own stories, to share their own stories, because it is really powerful.
And so when I finally did start talking, and I started with my hometown newspaper because they knew the story and they handled it well. You know, I wasn't even supposed to start talking in the fall of 14. It just happened. but talking helped me in a way nothing else could. So even talking to you helps. And then talking about it, because it's so rare for somebody like me to actually be able to speak up and willing to speak up, that I've had thousands of people reach out to me since I spoke up saying I'm helping them because they have criminal in their family, or they have mental illness, or they have trauma, you know, or they've committed a crime, or they need to forgive somebody. So I never expected that side of it, and that's all grace, you know, to be able to sit here like and say like, hey, I've been there, and you will get through this, and you will survive, you know. And I've been there where my family is still accused of hiding things. It's been almost 18 years. And my mom is still accused of having hid things that she knew about my father. I mean, one man's actions 40 some years ago still affects me daily, affects his grandchildren, affects these 7 families, affects the community. Law enforcement that spent decades of their career trying to catch my father. I mean, do you know what that does to like a detective? I mean, and now you're talking about the Idaho murders and those young policemen that went in first. Do you know how much like trauma counseling they're going to need? How much care these families are going to need? Like the media will go on. You're going to go on to the next horror and the next horror, but there's so many people profoundly affected for the rest of their lives.
You know, this brings up just bringing, you know, again, the Dr. Ramsland, like, what are the signs? I mean, there are some like the obvious ones, like we talked about already. The obvious ones, you kill animals, or you know, kill animals, or you have signs of violence as a child. You are overtly talking about killing people, hurting people, wanting to kill people, wanting to hurt people, photos or drawings or anything like that, right? But outside of that, she had no idea he was like model citizen. So how could you know? As she said, she talked about the masks, that they put on masks, right? You know, you look at Kohberger, my understanding is he was a TA, so he was teaching. So you know, he kind of comes across like a model person, right? Although because apparently he was said that he was a really tough grader. So how do you stop these people from acting like that? You know, part of what I want to do with Empowering True Crime, you know, we say educate, advocate, eradicate. How do we eradicate this type of deviant behavior, right? And so I think that as we continue, we look for these other signs. And I think it's really important to be vigilant, and to trust your gut, to trust your intuition.
And loss. I mean, we lost 4 young people. We lost their chances of being married, having children, you know, being positive like influences on society. We just lost them for no reason other than some guy couldn't control his deviant behavior and didn't ask for help. There was nothing stopping my father from walking into a police station in January of '74 and saying, I'm getting ready to commit this crime. Can you help me and put me in a mental hospital? There was nothing stopping Kohberger from doing that.
That's really powerful. Is being able to say, hey, something's wrong and I need help. And I think that if more people ask for help, then this would be better society. If more people ask for help.
They just don't care. They're a psychopath. They have this line. We have lines. We have moral lines we don't cross. They don't have one. Or it's very thin.
Kohberger being a criminology major and now getting his PhD, clearly interested in serial killers. Do you think the fascination, is part of the problem?
I don't know. It's so messy. I mean, you've got to train young minds to catch these guys, and you got to train them to catch them faster. right? So you're going to have to educate on these crimes. You've got to put my dad's in the textbooks. You know, all these big guys are in the textbooks. You got to put them in there because you got to study them. But where is that line of where it becomes a fascination or an obsession? And where does it become a line of trying to one up these guys and commit the perfect crime? That's in my opinion, that's where we're at with Kohberger. You know, in time, we're going to be able to tell. But I feel like I have a question. Did he join criminology to want to learn to maybe become like a detective or a forensic psychologist, or did he go into it knowing he had deviant behavior? Because my father.
Bingo, exactly. Which one came first? Did he do criminology and then got so wrapped up then the deviance formed, or was he deviant and then went into criminology, wanting to create the perfect murder?
Father knew he was a deviant from childhood, according to my father. So, but we're talking about with my father, somebody that didn't get help in the 40s and the 50s. There was no help. There were no labels for these guys. You know, nowadays, we would call my father saying he had a conduct disorder. Okay, so what's Kohberger's past? You know, what you don't just walk into a house and do this. Now, maybe it was his first murders, in my opinion. Time will tell. But
she did mention that her father was 28 as well when he committed his first murders, and he did it to 4 people. It was a family of 4. And then he went back to work, apparently didn't kill anybody for a little while. So it's like, you know, everything's normal.
There's a lead up of behavior from my father was breaking and entering, stalking, you know, drawing these things, fantasizing about bondage. My father's a sexual sadistic psychopath. I don't think that's the MO here with Kohberger. But there's all this hidden behavior that leads up to this. And why in this day and age, with all the help that there is, you know, working with these world-renowned, you know, criminologists, why is nobody catching this?
Yeah, that's another big thing for me. I've been reading on some heinous people who murdered, you know, for the first time. And it could be something as simple as they stole merchandise and lied about it, right? She's talking about burglary. You know, that was a big one. Burglary and stalking. And then of course, drawings and things like that as a younger person. But there can be so much, you know, in the Chris Watts case, I mean, I'm not really even sure. I mean, the deviance, I guess, would be that he lied about the cheating, right? So he was a liar, but there didn't seem to be any other deviance from Chris Watts. So it's interesting to see, you know, what Brian Laundrie, it could be said that maybe Brian Laundrie was a narcissist and was very jealous and you know, had anger control issues and things like that. That could probably be the deviance. So it's just interesting to see, you know, that there is a lead up, there is a ramp up, there's these other deviant behaviors or other behaviors that then lead to, but this is like an escalation, right? I mean, because you go from burglary, well, burglary, I guess a lot of people have been known to, you know, to burglar and then to kill somebody, you know, in that process. But with some of these other cases, it's like very small, you know, small deviance and then like killing. I mean, there's a big, huge jump there.
I mean, I don't know what that says if somebody is that deviant and is working academically with these people and they're not being caught. I mean, what chance do us regular people have? We don't really. I mean, if somebody wants to do this, they're going to do it. And that's something I had to learn. It was very hard to accept with my father. You cannot, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And hopefully you just catch them before they do it again. Because
I think just the fact, again, I mean, you said it already, but the fact that, you know, he was studying with this professor that has this intimate, close relationship with your father, it's just very strange.
It bothers me on a lot of levels because I know how narcissistic, pathological my father is, and how he wants to be known as this really bad man. He wants to be remembered as that. Was Kohberger seeking that out to be the next Bundy, the next BTK? I mean, people are even saying, hey, Kohberger's got the initials BCK. Now the kid you can't blame him for what he was born with his name, but at some point did that influence him later on? Did he?
Yeah, I thought that immediately. When I saw those initials, I was like, whoa, very disturbing. If there was a link there, maybe he thought it was cool. And so he, instead of BTK, he's BCK.
Did he think that was neat? Did that drive some of this? I don't know. I mean, the only person that really has those answers is Kohberger. So it's gonna take after the trial if he's even willing to talk. And if he's honest about it, because with somebody like my father, you can't necessarily believe what they're saying. Like you have to take it with a grain of salt, unfortunately. It's senseless. It's so senseless. It's so senseless and pointless and devastating. I want to figure out how to stop it. Like, it's hard to be the kid of this guy and live with this, and then see somebody else go do this and wonder, did your dad influence him? Did your dad talk to him? Like, was he studying my father outside of academics? I mean, am I ever going to get answers to that? I don't know.
Once again, it affects so many more than just, I mean, it really hurts so many families.
Oh. And it doesn't matter. Thousands of people have told me it's not my fault that I couldn't have helped my father when I was alive as a kid, but I still carry it with me every day. So, I mean, I speak up and do this because I think I have some answers, because I'm really, really sick of people saying like psychopaths don't have feelings, that it's all just a shell. And that's not how I knew my father. And the reason they hide so well is because for my father, he could turn it off and on and show you what he wanted to show you. But when he was with me, he was my dad. He wasn't ever BTK. I don't know BTK. There's only one person that survived BTK. So I'm interested, does Kohberger sort of have like that, those shells and layers of who he's showing people? I don't know. We'll probably find out in time, maybe.
Yeah. I come back to what she said about masks and being able to flip the switch, flip it on and off. So it's not like we are complex mental and emotional beings. So if we weren't, we would be animals, right? So it's not like they're completely devoid of any type of emotional capacity. It's just, like she said, I mean, it's so fascinating to be able to switch that on and off. Is like, does this person have multiple personalities? How does that work? So it's really fascinating.
I'm just really, really, really thankful they caught him so quickly. Excellent work on Ellie's part. And nowadays with DNA, there isn't the perfect crime. It doesn't exist, not anymore. So if anybody out there is trying to do it, just don't. You're going to get caught and ruin your life and everybody else's life around you.
Yeah. So some fascinating points here. I wanted to bring this up because, I thought from the perspective of the victim's family, of the perpetrator's family, what they're going through and getting into, and then their trauma and what possible indicators they could have that this person could, that the person that they're family with or whoever is actually committing or could be committed or could commit these crimes. Really, really interesting stuff that I wanted to share with you. I think that the biggest one was that PTSD is real. PTSD is real for the families of the victims and for the families of the perpetrators. The fact that they are wearing masks and that they're able to switch on and off, I thought that was a really interesting point as well. I thought she made a great point also at the end about not, her father it took decades to catch him. But nowadays with DNA and digital evidence, I mean, she didn't mention digital, but we all know, with digital evidence and DNA and genealogy connected to DNA, it's much easier to catch people based on those factors. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And yeah, so what are your thoughts? What do you think? What do you think about the family of Kohberger? What they're going through? And, as always, it's, we try to be empathetic, compassionate, caring for all involved, especially for the victims. And here I believe that assuming that the family of Kohberger were not involved, which there isn't any evidence at this point to show that he was, or that they were, that they're also victims in this sense. They're also feeling this. They're losing a son. Their family is affected and could be affected for the rest of their lives. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments. If you learned something today, appreciate if you hit the thumbs up. If you want to learn more empowering true crime updates, we go and dive into sharing survivors' stories, really learning about the victims, justice for victims. Always, we're very victim focused. We believe victims, and always trying to show as much compassion, empathy as possible for all involved. Appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. And if you have a tip or if you have a story to share, you can email empoweringtruecrime@gmail.com. And I'd love to be able to highlight your story if it fits within our channel. All right, everyone, be safe, stay thriving, and remember to keep it empowering. Have an empowering week, everyone. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for notifications. Thank you.